Welcome, one and all, to another exciting episode of Information Revolution, a podcast for people working in information about what's happening right now and where we're going. My name's Michael Upton. I'm the director of Metataxis New Zealand, a little consulting company based in Wellington. And I guess my working life has been focused on digital information.
And I'm Judi Vernau, also a director of Metataxis New Zealand, and I'm an information architect.
And my name's Karl Melrose. I work for Castlepoint Systems in Canberra. And just a quick disclaimer, my views are my own. And today's episode. So today, this episode's probably going to wander a little bit. We were having a chat after our last episode about what we'd like to cover next time. And we've come up with about 5 or 6 different quite specific topics, but the general theme was people stuff. You know, every single time we looked at any of it, it was, people this, management that, users this, information culture, but it just ended up being people stuff. And so we're going to wander through that a little bit today and just give you a sense of what we mean by that. And then over the next sort of 5 or 6 podcasts, I think you'll find that we go into a bit more detail on each one. So does someone want to kick us off with a bit of a comment about what people stuff means?
Yeah, sure. I'll give that a go. I guess one of the things that I was thinking about is that one of the risks or challenges with information and records teams is that sometimes they end up basically being glorified system administrators. So basically looking after systems and worrying all about either, some combination of compliance and performance and functional performance and requirement fit of systems and how they're going to work and how that stuff happens. And there'll be these bits where people are like, oh, we'll have to cover this off for the policy. But, the guts of what people are all about, like what they spend most of their time on, will often be around how the systems interact and what are we going to do about this system? Oh, we've got this new thing and people have started putting records in this new location digitally and, so wash and how are we going to configure systems? And I guess for me, I guess what I'd say is that while many people will acknowledge that when we're thinking about a sort of an information environment, we're thinking about systems in that really broad sense, not a technology system, but a system in the sense of basically how things work and what the sort of cogs are. And the cogs include, people and process and platform, the Ps and all of that stuff. But in reality, I think there could be a real benefit in us just talking through that people stuff. Like what is it that as sort of professionals or practitioners we could be investing our time in with regards to people to make the use of information work better in an organization, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment for me that made it when we were discussing this last week was that, so many records or information management programs break when they hit users because they just ask people to do things that, that they're either too much effort or they're out of the line of the business process that they're trying to run, or, that they haven't done the change management right. And so, managers don't understand what's in it for them. And they've got 2,000 different things to do and they've only got time for 1,800 of them. And you've just stacked on a whole bunch of, more to-dos on top of that they don't see the value in. It's all those sorts of issues.
And if you're thinking about the technology if you're thinking about it just as technology, then of course people are going to be spending their time, the information managers spending their time kind of feeding and watering the technology and not thinking about watering the information itself, let alone thinking about what the people who use that need. They're not thinking about the technology as an enabler. They're thinking of it as the thing. And what do we need to keep this running? How do we create all the new SharePoint sites that people want all of that kind of stuff. And so the information managers, exactly what Michael said, they just end up as glorified admins instead of being able to sit back and really think about what's needed, think about what people actually need. Seems to me. I mean, it seems to be so hard even to keep that technology fed and watered, as it were. That people don't have the time to sit back. It's not as if they're just doing that because it's what they like doing. There's no opportunity to sit back and think about what do we actually need here to keep our lifeblood flowing effectively through the organization.
Yeah, it's for me, I don't know. I don't remember who it was. I think it was a mixture of Kate Fueling and a friend of mine, Cheryl. But, the way I've been thinking about this stuff for the last couple of years is, it's sort of, it's a cycle, and it's sort of, strategy, policy, governance, people, process, technology. But it's actually, I think we know how to do strategy, policy, governance, process, and technology. But I think the people bit, I think it kind of determines everything else. I think you can be a bit mediocre on all of the other stuff, but as long as you get the people dimension right, I think it can all kind of work. But, the whole stakeholder engagement piece.
I think that's right, because I think people are quite often willing to put up with something quite simple, actually, if it's really clear how it works, that it does what they're expecting it to do, that they can find what they need to find. It doesn't need to necessarily be that complex. I think it's quite often overcomplicated because we've got this new piece of kit or whatever it is. And that gets in the way of providing people with the really basic stuff that they need, i.e. they know how to create this, they know where to put it, they know where to find it, they know how to share it. But I think that gets lost. We lose sight of that.
I think one risky part of focusing on technology stuff as well is that, we're living, it's not really a matter of living. We're working in an age where consumerization of IT has hit that point where people typically have better tools and technology for their personal requirements at home, So if you're a techie type, then you've got the world at your fingertips in terms of what you can do in terms of technical solutions. And so you come to work and you go, this is all a bit average, or, I wish it were more like the thing that I'm used to doing at home. And I think one of the key sort of people aspects is establishing kind of just kind of clear and reasonable ways of working that emphasize the value of commonality and consistency. So one of the things that I will always push is that in organizations where people change what they're doing, so that could be within your role, it could be moving around the organization, it could be the whole business shifting, depends on your context, that consistency in the information environment, so repeatable patterns and so forth, like that stuff really increases your ability to respond to change. Trying to dodge that agility word, but so it puts you in that position where you can move around. So I guess that's one thing I'd put out there in terms of people stuff, is that idea of thinking about sort of repeatable patterns of use. So I think in the design world they actually talk about design patterns, but basically how would I get to the thing that I want to do, and how do we make sure that that's roughly similar in different situations? Yeah,
which is all about the information architecture and making sure that it has that consistency across the organization, and you always know where you are and how to move from here to there when you want to. That's really, and the terminology that you're using is familiar across the organization and not completely different, and the tools and the templates and etc. Exactly.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is one of those people aspects, or the sort of change parts of that, is not just establishing an architecture, but making sure that it's clear to people why it's good. Why should I do it this way when, at home or at my last job or whatever, I've got these preconceptions about what good is, and I want to do it my way. That's the real risk of not investing in the architecture, is just that people just come in with this assumption that if I can just do things the way that I've always done them, or do them in a way that I know is good, then that's good enough, and it's the best option for the organization, which is not often going to be true.
You're talking about
luck if that turns out to be true.
You're talking about the difference, though, in contexts. Like you say, you go home and, I had this too. Like I've got this super duper AI app that, manages all of the extra stuff that I have to do and actually finds all my spare time and plugs it into my calendar. And I've got something else to manage little projects that I've got, and I have all of this stuff. But what I don't have is I don't have something that helps me coordinate all this activity with other people. And that's the difference in the context. I do all my stuff at home, and it's great because I do it on my own, and I have one person's change management to worry about, and I have one person's everything else to worry about. And then I come into work, and we're talking about big processes that legislation's defined, and there's 50 people who have to work on this process in order to get it from end to end. And I think that context change, that's something that we don't adequately help people deal with, and it does change the tools and the considerations for working. But because change management is so hard, and it's so hard to get funded as well, like I've lost count of the number of projects where they wanted to buy everything except the change management, and the entire project fails because there's no change management. I think there's also a big thing to be said too for helping people understand what the difference is between a low quality and a high quality information environment, because I think that lots of people don't understand what that looks like. And I think that once they do, I think in a lot of ways we've become so obsessed with this, put the record in the system, and you have to do that because legislation, compliance, et cetera, without going to people and saying, well, how do we change the quality of the information you're working with? Because I know people who have worked in high quality information environments, and you know what? No one wants to go back. It's working in an environment. I wrote a blog post about this recently. It's the right the right information, right place at the right time. Well, and if that information's coming through to you on post-it notes, yes, it's still the right information in the right place at the right time. But you know what? If it's coming through as structured data, and you don't have to do 50% of the work you'd have to do if it was on a post-it note because it's coming through to you as structured data. I mean, who wants to go back to the post-it notes? No one. But training people to ask for a better information. I mean, this is something that, Karl Heinz does really well, that virtuous cycle angle that we keep talking about with him and his work. It's teaching people to ask for a better information environment. And I think that's a huge thing.
I think it's
definitely.
It's wider than that. I think it's teaching people to think about information at all, just to actually think about the fact that they're probably creating information every day. If they're working in government, for example, if they're working on the car production line, then probably not. But for those of us who do work in a desk situation, we're creating information probably every day. Actually, at some level, we are creating something every day.
Everyone sends at least one email.
Yeah, exactly. But you just do that without thinking about it. You don't think, I'm creating this new bit of information. And obviously, we need to be sensible about this. But
this relates.
Getting up that level of awareness of what this is and how it works. And then getting that to join expectations, which is what you were talking about there, Michael. What is the expectation of people? But what I wanted to ask you guys was the difference between being able to set up a system from scratch, an information system from scratch, and then as opposed to helping people who've come into the organization and are having to deal with things as they are, when they come in, which might be, as you say, not exactly ideal or quality focused. How do we, I think it's relatively easy to think what we might do, although not many people do this, but what we might do when we're putting in a new system. But how do we help people when they're coming into something that's already there?
Well, yeah, I mean, the default's training, right? But, I mean, that can be really confronting. And, I think we made reference to it a couple of podcasts ago, I was talking to one of these councils, and they were saying that, their turnover rate's about 25%. And I mean, you can't, how do you build and maintain a mature information culture when your team turns over, every 4 years, you've turned over the entire organization. Obviously, you've got people who stick around, but and then, if you have built a really mature information culture and you've got people who are really sophisticated consumers and users of information, and then your turnover rate gets up and you lose some core people, I mean, how do you bridge that gap? I mean, I think that's a non-trivial problem.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, so let's pretend that's not the problem. I mean, if you do have an organization where you've just got established systems in place and people don't seem to be having a good time, then I will still just push for that kind of process mapping idea as a way of going and engaging with a group of users. So basically identifying a team, identifying a problem within a team, and then basically saying, well, can I help you basically sketch out your process? And I'm going to bring the information lens. I'm going to be the one who goes, oh yeah, so what do you need? What information do you need to achieve that? And sort of the situational context that basically helps you determine the quality. So basically how should that information be in order to make this thing easy for you? And then if there need to be changes to the system, there need to be changes to the system. So you tweak that part, hopefully with a broader view in mind, so that you don't kind of get into horrible architectural debt, but tweak that bit. And it may also be that it's not the system that needs to change anyway. It's actually just about the collection of the information. So you're just showing people the implications of their actions, basically. So again, it's about building that awareness. But specifically, I think it's just a question of focusing that on a particular bit of the organization and a particular problem at a time, so that you can incrementally shift the culture. I think you've got established systems. Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is user engagement, but I think that whole stakeholder management piece too needs a lot of attention from us, because how you create an enabling environment in your organization where a manager won't just that they won't suffer having you in their team. And I mean, the thing, right? You sit down and you say, look, it's a half-day exercise to properly map this process and all the information assets, and I'm going to need, significant representation from your team. And, you ask for half a day, and, then they say, oh, well, I can get one person to come along for half a day. And then, it gets squeezed down to an hour. And before you know it, you're trying to map a process and everything in half an hour, because that stakeholder engagement, with management hasn't happened. And, what about your executive, who ultimately, kind of bless your program and policy and everything else? The whole stakeholder engagement piece too, I think needs a lot of attention, because I think one of the things that is leading records to failure in lots of organizations is just that the executive are looking at it and saying, I spend $1 million a year on this, and I don't understand how it improves my ability to hit any of the things that, I've got to hit. And managers, the same kind of thing, they look at it and they say, well, it's a drain on my team. We've got to do all this extra work and I don't understand what we get, because I think the stakeholder engagement piece hasn't happened right.
So what I'd say in terms of stakeholder, oh, sorry, Judi.
Well, I was just going to say, go on.
One really brief thing. All I'd say is my advice in terms of stakeholder management is target managers, target the middle layer. Don't go for the exec straight away. It feels like the best thing to do is to get that strategic buy-in and set the direction. But actually, if I can go and work with someone who is a bit closer to the operational coalface and I can identify how their team can improve, then they can just go, oh, that guy Michael sorted out my problem, and they can go and gush to the exec. And it's typically like in a change management scenario, I've found focusing on that kind of middle layer is actually more valuable than going for the exec.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, because as you say, they understand what needs to happen and the pain that is caused when it doesn't happen. So you're much more likely to get their attention, I think. I'm just wondering how, when we're talking about the change management, quite a few departments I've worked in have business process management teams. And so are they not looking at how the information flows work? I wonder.
Potentially. Yeah.
Well,
they ought to be.
I mean, what's a process except, how work and the information and records flow from person to person in the organisation?
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's part of the.
There might be things that we want to add in. Sorry, go Karl.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, to both your points. I mean, I think that's one of the things that has happened with records management. I mean, I think all of the bits that we need to do to really do records management well, because it's been seen as, I mean, it's come from a paper management background where, it's you get to the end of the process and the paper goes to the records team and they manage it so you can find it later. But it's not that anymore. There is so much more to it now, and process management has to come into it. And so, I mean, I think a lot of it, and I completely agree with you on the, the sort of middle up down idea. Engage with middle managers. I think one of the challenges that we've got is that a lot of people go straight to the executive, but the executives sit there and they go, well, this role that I've got for records in my head is not what you're asking for. And so, and either I don't know you, or, I haven't seen records as a contributor to organizational performance before. So I'm not going to bless something big that you want to do. Whereas, if you've gone to a middle manager and you've got a middle manager singing your praises to an executive manager, then I think you're in a much better position to start looking wider. But I mean, I think too, if you end up in an area of the organization where process management, is in some other business unit, it makes it very hard to come in and basically say, I now need to do process management, because as information management, that is absolutely integral.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Hey, I'll just take us a little bit sideways, just having been talking about change management and so forth, and thinking about raising awareness of what what a good information environment even looks like. There's an absolute classic model which I've seen come up in multiple organizations, which is from an organization called ProSci, called the ADKAR change management model. And the first letter in ADKAR, like it's one of those classic acronyms. Do we call that an acronym?
Yep.
Always get mixed up. The first one is awareness. So the idea of ADKAR is, I mean, I don't want to pretend that I'm a change management professional, but in terms of a framework, I think it's a useful thing for any of us to just have a nosy at and think about. And it's basically stepping users through the stages to get to the point where the change has been adopted. So it starts with awareness and it ends with reinforcement. So that idea that someone knows how to do something now and they're doing it, and they still need, just emphasis after the change to make sure that it sticks and that continues. So I just wanted to throw that in there just as something that, if you're listening to this, you could go and take a look at. Yeah. I
mean, I think all of those sorts of things. I mean, I think we need to get some people on who are really good at that stuff. But I mean, I think half the problem with the ADKAR model is that lots of people read it and they say, well, awareness. We're going to go in and we're going to say, here is awareness of the change that's coming that we're going to do to you. And they skip the idea that the idea is to create awareness of a problem, and the fact that things could be better, so that there is a desire for change. And I mean, I don't know about you, but how many programs have you seen derailed because it's like, here, become aware of what we're going to do to you?
I sent my comms, I've sent my emails, awareness.
Yeah, there's awareness. yeah, we can do awareness.
they know
we've
the
sent the
project
email.
is coming. Yeah. And absolutely, like I think what we've been talking about is basically the meaningful version of what, the awareness is supposed to be, which is that idea that, you're working with people to kind of really instill an idea in their heads about how things could be better or what's wrong with where they're at right now. And it's probably, a bunch of back and forth. It's probably multiple conversations or multiple pieces of work, mocking some things up and showing them some ideas, or that kind of thing, whether you're formally or informally understanding what they do, so is it formal process mapping or is it just sort of doing it on the sly? And it's building awareness, as you said, Karl, of like kind of the potential problems and so forth, rather than just awareness something's coming.
Awareness that things could be better than the way you're doing it. And I
sure.
think there's so much fodder for us to talk about here too. I think we can get into things like user experience, which, sure. I don't think is something that's really made a massive inroad into information management. But also, some of the more traditional, well, I don't even want to call it traditional because I don't think it is traditional for information management to focus on it, but it probably should be, like search behavior and information retrieval.
Yeah, which is definitely a topic I want to cover in a forthcoming. In fact, we might even do it next week.
With
you guys.
Next episode. Yeah.
Just talk about the different ways people are trying to find stuff and what you need to support that. I think that would be a good topic.
I think that'd be excellent. I would certainly turn up for that.
Just wanted to say, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know ADKAR, it's ADKAR. You're looking it up. Looking it up. Awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, which is an interesting one. I like the reinforcement one.
Well, it kind of ties in neatly with governance, doesn't it? We've written a policy. How do we make sure the policy is being implemented in the organisation? That's governance. So, I think these things every time I look at these models, I feel like there's so much crossover and they all relate to each other so strongly. But it's just interesting that, some things haven't made so many inroads, or, I see so many things done as the tick box exercise instead of we are really serious about making this change happen and this cultural thing happen. So, and, I think the information culture piece, I think if we can get into that, how we get people to ask for more and how we get them to treat information as though it's important for their job. Anyway, I think there's lots of fodder there for future
definitely
episodes.
Fantastic. So that's us for today, I guess. Yeah,
I think so. And like we said at the start, I think we wandered around a little bit, but I think this is because the people piece, the people stuff is really hard, and
sure.
I don't think it's well done in most places.
No, I agree. But crucial.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that one of the things we will end up doing over the next couple of weeks as well is, we've got a couple of people that we'd like to ask to come on and talk about things that, they've written papers on, information culture and those sorts of things, or written books about. So, I'm really looking forward to that. And, we're going to start Judi next week with, search behavior by the sounds of things, which is great because it's something that I don't know a whole lot about. So
bring it on. Cool. So I'll just wrap us up by saying that if you're listening to this and you think, well, what are the actual sort of, the tangible things or the actionable things, the things that would make it real for you in terms of people stuff, then please let us know and we'll get into it. So that's Information Revolution for another episode. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.